good to be back in the dun-dun-dun-dunny.
Yeah, back in the dunny. Those claps mean we're back in the dunny.
Yeah, just creating a conditioned response for our listeners to anticipate our silky smooth radio voice.
Ah, good thinking.
Lucky them.
Yeah, every time they're out in public and they hear the noise of applause or clapping, they automatically expect these silky smooth voices.
Yeah, just think next time they're in a stadium and there's tons of clapping,
Just
how let down they'll be.
oh, just a letdown. Yeah. Whatever they're observing, I'm sure won't compare to this.
No doubt. Oh, what a letdown for everyone when they don't hear our radio smooth voice. It's a strange world out there, huh?
Oh, it's strange right now. Yeah, COVID-19. It's a quiet, still world.
It is. We did see a car drive by the alley a little bit ago. That was exciting.
Yeah, it's another human.
There's another human out there.
Yeah.
This is great.
And we're six feet apart.
We'll call it a rough 6 feet.
Rough 6 feet?
Yeah.
Doing that social or physical distancing?
Yeah, well, it's physical distancing with social connecting.
Yeah.
Something like that, huh?
So how's this changed your day-to-day professional life?
Man, it is very different in a lot of ways. Haven't been coming into the office. I've been staying at home doing telehealth, which is a huge transition, right? Like seeing clients over the computer.
Oh, yeah. That's I moved to telehealth as well. It's a big transition.
It is, I think initially, like kind of feel a little bit of resistance about it, but I kind of also see there's a huge opportunity in it. It's probably going to be a part of our future in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So you're not being dragged into the future kicking and screaming like I am.
Yeah, I'm enjoying watching you kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Using all this tech and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, man. Well, the one way that I can look at it is learning how to use all this tech is novelty. So it's learning, it's helping my neuroplasticity, and that's the way I got to frame it so that there's some benefit to all of this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the neuroplasticity thing, relating back to that podcast we dropped a while ago. And the thing that I would think with that, one, novelty, so telehealth is new for you.
Yeah.
Two, and it's posing quite a challenge.
Yeah, dude, technology. I mean, at the rate we're going, at the rate that I'm forced to adapt to technology right now, I may have an Instagram account at some point in the future.
Instagramful Dan?
I mean, it's not likely, but I mean, like, if this continued for 10 years, I may end up having an Instagram account.
So it would take 10 years of pandemic for you to get an Instagram account?
10 years of forced social isolation that required the use of technology?
Wow.
I guess that's what it is.
I've never thought I'd ever root for a pandemic, but in this case, whatever it takes to get you an Instagram account.
Would that be worth what I would have to post on Instagram?
Absolutely not. And it would be so much time for me showing you how to use Instagram that, no, like, let's end this pandemic. Let's keep Dan off Instagram.
Yeah.
This is okay.
There we go. That's something to root for.
Yeah.
Let's keep Dan Instagramless. Instagramless Dan, let's get this pandemic dealt with so that we can ensure that Instagramless Dan remains.
Yeah, so let's keep it that way. Let's make sure Dan stays off Instagram.
Yeah.
Speaking of Instagram, we got a shout out for Lake Mary.
Shout out for Lake Mary.
We did. We got a hashtag Booyah Lake Mary from @Taylor Oster.
Oh, well, thanks, Taylor Oster.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, I guess.
One thing I would say is, so I love riding out and the scenery around Lake Mary. I'm talking about being in Lake Mary. That's where it goes from being a lake to more of like a mud pond.
What a great lake.
Yeah, is Taylor a local?
Yeah, she's from Flagstaff.
Ah, okay. Well, that explains it.
You say that with judgment.
Well, not judgment, just good contextual awareness in that people unfamiliar with what lakes traditionally look like may consider that to be a very beautiful lake on the inside.
I've read about lakes. I've seen pictures of lakes.
Yeah.
Lake Mary fits the bill.
Okay. Okay. What do we got today?
Oh, yeah, we're going beyond flag.
Yeah, beyond flag. I'm excited for today. So who are we interviewing today?
Yeah, no doubt. So for today's episode, we're going beyond flag with Davona Blackhorse, a clinical mental health counselor who is currently working towards a PhD in interdisciplinary studies from... Well, let me ask you a question first, Dan. What school makes Princeton and Yale look like a junior college that holds their classes online in the bottom of the ocean?
junior college, online classes in the bottom of the ocean, Princeton and Yale.
Princeton and Yale. Yeah, what school makes them look like that?
Uh,
NAU. Duh.
oh, the Harvard of the West.
Harvard of the West.
Yeah, okay.
Go Lumberjays. In Davona's program, her studies focus on the psychological impact of toxic land mining exposure on the Navajo reservation and historical trauma among Native Americans. In 2017, alongside Ann Collier, chair of psychological sciences at NAU at the time, and Sean Scabalund, a local artist, they together developed a social practice art exhibition titled Hope and Trauma in a Poisoned Land, which took place in 2017 and portrayed the impact of uranium mining on Navajo lands and its people.
Oof, powerful.
Powerful stuff. I anticipate we'll hear about that today.
Yeah.
Most recently, in November of 2019, she was a featured speaker at the National History Institute's annual conference on reciprocal healing, which took place in Sedona. Davona is bright, strong, and courageous. I'm really looking forward to sitting in the dunny with her. What are you looking for in this one, Dan?
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this interview today. So even introducing what you just referenced in terms of her research and installment, I think it's going to be a real powerful opportunity to sit back and listen and learn. In fact, that reminds me, I did as part of that online course I'm doing about happiness.
Yeah.
I did the Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
Guess what my number 2 strength is?
Being a well, okay, what is it?
It's love of learning.
Love of learning.
Yeah. Right behind number 1. You want to know what number 1 is?
Being a jackass.
No, that one was way down on the list.
3? What was 1?
Number 1 was judgment.
Judgment.
Yeah.
So not surprised.
That I'm good at judging?
Yeah. 1 is judgment. 2 is love of learning. So you take your knowledge and you make judgments about it.
Yeah. I use my number 2 strength to really hone in on my number 1 strength.
Yeah, so the fun thing that I would say there is that maybe judgment and discernment are 2 different things here.
Well, what's most important, though, is that you can know with my love of learning and my ability to judge that you can come to me for advice at any time.
And not feel judged.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in all honesty, I'm really looking forward to sitting back and learning from Davona. I think it's going to be a real opportunity to understand more about some of those experiences in her, upbringing and traditional heritage. So I'm looking forward to learning.
Yeah, certainly. Such a neat person. I think this will be a great interview. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's go beyond flag with
Davona, Blackhorse. Welcome to Beyond Flag, a Beyond the Pines production, created by, with, and for the people of Flagstaff, building connection in the town we love. We are your hosts,
Dr. Daniel J. Phillips
and Cody Bayless, also known as Dr. Chinchilla Nice Nice. Thanks for tuning in as we go beyond flag, straight from the dunny of our observatory.
Very cool. So we're back in the dunny, and we're sitting here with Davona. Davona, thanks for joining us. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit and then talking about what your day-to-day life is like?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll introduce myself in Navajo. Yat Shadina, She Davona Blackhorse in Shia, Eshin Shlendo, Trachini Bashishin, Sitna Jenny A Dashache do, Eshin Dashanella. Ekut San Shle Ado I see She I see Ditlin Sada Nasha. Hi, my name's Davona, and yeah, I'm from Big Mountain, Arizona, and I'm a direct descendant of historical trauma, so I'm kind of through those lens is how I basically decided to come to Flag, because I felt like I was, being closer to home. It was just a little easier to be connected to that spiritual part of myself. It was really hard living in the city. I couldn't do the city. There was no free range, especially for my kids. So I said, you know what? I think we need to make this move. Plus, they had a trilingual school here in Flag. So I wanted my kids to learn the Navajo language. And so that was one of the things I enrolled in when I was finishing my associate's degree at Glendale Community College. And I was excited to come back. I was excited to, be in a place where I saw a lot of Indigenous people. I was excited to be close to the sacred mountain, the O'Osleed. It's just important to me to always return back, to where I come from and to my roots. But unfortunately, I couldn't go all the way back to the reservation. There's a lot going on there with, mining and relocation. So I decided it would be best for me to go to school. And so I, enrolled into NAU.
Okay.
Psychology.
Yeah. And so is that what your day-to-day looks like now? Is it a lot of schooling?
Yes. Yes. Too much schooling.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much this was going to take out of my life every day. I was telling my son, I don't know how people do this. How do people do this? This is so difficult. And I feel like there's not enough time in the day to get all these papers done, to get all this reading done, to, do my job at the same time. And he's like, Mom, didn't you know that people who get their doctorates aren't supposed to sleep?
Well, so then that gives us a little in. You're working on your doctorate. So what degree program is it that you're working on? And then you're working as well on top of completing your PhD? Wow.
Yeah, I'm in the interdisciplinary health program, and I'm working. My GA is with Dr. Janie Ingram and Dr. Angelina Castano, and we're working on Indigenous ethical issues in STEM. So we're basically looking at the pipeline issues that Indigenous people face and why we don't have that much representation of the Indigenous people in sciences, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and if that's related to any taboos or any cultural practices, because Dr. Ingram is a chemistry professor, and she found that some of her students had an issue working with dissection, working with human lungs and things like that. So because she was Native, she was able to navigate through that. But her thought process was like, well, how does this work for other Indigenous students, who don't have a Native professor or a profession that knows about these things and that can help them navigate this better? And so, we set up a series of interview questions and surveys. And right now we're in the interview process. We just recently went to Wisconsin for a conference and presented just the beginning of our work and some of the stuff that we have collected.
Wow. How far are you into the program?
2 years. This is my last semester. So yay, I'm going to be done really soon. I'm just trying to get through. I'm getting that senioritis thing where I just don't want to do anything. And you're not supposed to get a C in the program. And now this semester, I'm like, I haven't gotten any C's. I've gotten good grades. Maybe I'll just get that C.
Let it slide.
Yeah, it's a burnout. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work, but I feel like the stuff that I'm learning is just amazing. Yeah. I mean, when you're in a graduate program, you kind of have more autonomy in what you're going to choose as far as a profession. You have more autonomy of some of the classes that you want to select. So I've taken a lot more feminist classes, stuff like gender and nature, women, Indigenous feminism, things like that. So it's been a huge deal for me this semester to learn all these things. And plus I'm doing medical anthropology, which also has a lot of very, very great readings that we have been exposed to. So it's just a lot of growth, and it's a lot of like, whoa, I can't believe this. And then your mind's just like, trying to like absorb all this information and trying to apply it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I feel a bit like a parallel process here, because like there's so many questions I want to ask you, and it's probably what your life is like. It's so many. You just make these mentions of tangents that would be so interesting to learn about. It sounds like that's been your life for 2.5 years now, finishing up.
Yeah, I think it's just well, when I was in the counseling program, it was wonderful. I was like, yeah, I'm finally doing this, and I thought I would stop there, but I just kind of felt a little stuck in this Western ideology of just practicing under these rules that you know, you don't want to break your ethical there's just a lot of ethical dilemmas, and it was hard. I was just like, you know what, I don't know if I can do this because I want to do more. You know, I feel like we're not doing enough, and I feel like a lot of this is because we have to indigenize a lot of our practices. We have to indigenize counseling. We have to indigenize research. We have to understand historical trauma on a deeper level and understand why people are, I mean, the Native population, they're the hugest population. When I started my internship, I was the only Native, well, there's one other Native person there, Marvin, but we were the only two there, but everybody else that was staff was white, and all the patients were Native.
Yeah.
So that just kind of felt odd to me, and it kind of, that whole, feelings of internalized oppression kind of came back. And then I started to feel this sense of shame and wow, what does this mean? You know, and how do there was a lot of microaggressions and different things that I experienced. And I was like, wow, I need to learn more. I need to know how we're going to implement things like this so that people, especially professionals who are working that are Indigenous, can, you know, better handle these situations when we're in a place where there's a dominant race and, you know, we feel a little stuck, just, I don't know, practicing the ways that really we're not used to, you know?
Yeah. Just like Dan was saying, I have a million questions going through my mind right now. You're mentioning some things that are so important, I believe. I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned. This really stuck out to me when you were talking about the importance of, and the word I heard you use was to indigenize counseling, research, and there was one other thing.
I forgot. I caught the counseling and research, though. The counseling really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I wanted to hear what that would look like in practice. It sounded like your experience in the program was man, we're not proportionally or accurately best represented here. I want to make changes.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, there's a lot of, I think people need to recognize first that Indigenous people have a foundation already. They have a knowledge base. And, you know, in the beginning, it was you need to go to school, you need to take this medicine and do things in this way. And then Native Americans had a more holistic view on how we dealt with things. And now it feels like people are trying to go back to that. And so I think, so I'm taking a CBPR class now, community-based participatory research. And one of the things that Dr. Duran, Bonnie Duran, has taught us is that don't make plans without us. I mean, we want to be a part of that planning process. We want to be involved in the research. We don't want people coming out to the reservation and with their own questions that they want to prove right, you know. We want to be a part of that process. We have the knowledge of our own people. We know the issues. You know, we have our own representatives that are dealing with these situations. We have our own people in public health that know what's going on, and those are the people that we need to rely on for this information, to empower people to work and do research, you know, themselves in partnership with them. And I feel like we need to change that model of let's do research on this group of people and find out what's wrong with them, and then let's fix their behavior, because that usually doesn't work. Is it working for us now? No. We have high rates of suicide. We have high rates of addiction and drug use and domestic violence, everything socially. We're just psychosocially and biologically impacted.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned the impact of historical trauma.
Yeah.
And something I heard you say that really stuck out to me was like, we know what we're doing. Like, it sounds like empowering is the word that I heard you use also. And it doesn't look like asking these questions and coming out to the reservation to find answers through the white man lens, if I hear it right. But it's kind of like empowering what's already happening there to grow, if I hear you right.
Yeah, it's really hard to, self-governance is really hard. And then I feel like we're just adaptable people.
Yeah.
And we need to, a lot of people's lens, especially Indigenous people, has been distorted, through this lens of trauma. The way we see things is very traumatized. And that really debilitates us and inhibits our ability to think past, what the possibilities could be for self-determination and how we move forward as a people. And I feel like it's kind of like mining. It's like when people go onto the reservation and they mine the land and they strip it and they take, what they need from it and leave it, and the land's traumatized. So people also are traumatized, and they're also their way of thinking is mined.
Yeah.
Our way of being is mined, just like the land has been mined. So they basically took what we know and replaced it with this Western knowledge, and that has really changed how we use our intelligence and how we see things, where we place our priorities as far as what the real issues are. And I feel like we've been given a gift of intelligence, from our creator, and that's how we are adaptable. But if we're not using it responsibly, and we don't know how to use it responsibly, because all these practices that we're using are not working because they're not really our way. They're not teaching us about ourselves. We don't have enough opportunities to see ourselves and in a good light, in a positive light.
Yeah.
Boy, this is so powerful. I could listen to this for hours. It makes me think in real time, your experience with this, you're kind of describing those moments where you were in higher education and you felt oppressed in a way. You could feel the ambiance, the tone of feeling like you're being handed an ethnocentric Western view that you're expected to operate within.
Yeah.
And yet you have all this foundation and basis. So then how did you overcome that? You've persisted in graduate education despite having that experience of feeling intimidated or oppressed. How did you overcome that?
Well, I think it really starts from when I was a kid. There was a lot of this intergenerational trauma is something that I was brought up in. I have veterans in my family. I have people that worked on the railroads and had to leave to get different jobs. I've had my father's a boarding school survivor. I've had stories of the long walk passed down to me. It was just this idea of complex trauma just being everywhere. And then being a kid growing up in that and knowing that something's wrong, I think I've always had that psychological way of thinking about things and looking up at the world like, something's not right. This really isn't the way it should be. But I was raised a lot at my childhood with my Nellie, my dad's mom. And I felt like I had a lot of time at sheep camp, and sheep camp is like where she lives. So there's no electricity, there's no running water. But we had a lot of horses, we had a lot of sheep, we had a huge cornfield, and we had free range. I mean, we'd let our cows go and then get them back months later, and we do branding. We had all these. We had a way of life, and we were very rich. And people would sometimes visit us, you know, outsiders, and say, wow, you guys are poor, you guys don't have running water, you don't have electricity. I'm thinking, like, we have a few wells that are great around here. They're not contaminated, you know. We have a lot of animals. I felt pretty rich, but in their eyes that was being poor. And I was like, okay, well. And then the mining happened. And then they put fences up and they blocked us off. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, this is what poverty is. This is actually real poverty. Poverty, what they saw poverty as, wasn't real poverty. I don't know if they, like, you need our ways, you know, we're going to, like, now we're going to give you commodity foods, which led to, you know, our high rates of diabetes right now. So it's just like a complete change. But before that time, I had a lot of free range. Like I said, we had a lot of livestock.
Where was this at?
In Big Mountain, Arizona.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time outside. I would build tree houses and just like... So the Navajo way, when you're born, your umbilical cord is buried, you know, in the land that... in your sheep camp, and, you know, where your grandma's out, just your homeland. And... So the way of thinking is that we have that connection to Mother Nature. You know, that's our connection. Like, once we leave the mother's womb, you know, this is also our mother, and this is who's going to nurture us. And we need to respect that. So I feel like when the adults and different people around me failed me, I had Mother Nature, and it really helped me to see that I was a part of a bigger thing, you know, the universe, like I had a place. So that really was a healing process for me to get through all those hard times and to feel the pain and suffering that the environment was feeling. And I was like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do forever.
As a child.
Yeah. As a child, I just kind of knew. I was like, and I knew I was going to be a counselor. It's like, I'm going to help people, you know, this is my way. And I just kind of held on to that. But yeah, it was just kind of, I really feel like Mother Nature did that. I really feel like being connected to the environment, like that sentient, you know, awareness and connection was really huge for me.
Yeah. Can you talk more about that connection to the environment, and also how it relates to the Navajo way, like you were saying?
Well, you know, John Bowlby says that you need a good connection to your mother or a caregiver. So Indigenous people feel the same way. We do value that relationship to our mother. We do value our caregivers, but we also recognize that as an extension to that, the environment is also the mother, you know, is also someone that we embrace. And she's going to be the one to nurture us, you know, for the rest of our lives. So I feel like that's just something that we need to recognize. And it's like this reversal thing that we have, and responsibility that we have to the environment. I mean, we value corn. A lot of Indigenous cultures value corn, and corn can't be sustained without human contact. So the way we see it is that the holy people gave us that gift, and it can't grow without us. So I don't know if you've ever tried to plant corn. You need to nurture it. You need to plant it. It has to be done right. Otherwise, it's not gonna grow. It's not gonna flourish.
Right. Yeah, you're talking about this two-way relationship between us and our environment.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be so lost in many ways today. I was wondering if, even like you were saying, as a child at a big mountain, growing up thinking like, I need to do something with this. It sounded like you had this vision for yourself, and the environment was very much a part of that. your study is, a lot of it is in uranium. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about uranium mining and what you're investigating and what's important about it to you?
I like to look at the psychological impact of it and the spiritual impact, and how that has how that's something that's ongoing, not something that's a long time ago. Because people, when they hear the word historical trauma or colonization, they think that this is something that happened in the cowboys and Indian days, but it's actually still happening now. It's like trying to like spread this awareness, like this issue is happening right now. And it happened to me as a child, and I saw like the way it affected my family. I saw the way the elders were really heartbroken, and there was a lot of sadness, knowing that people can just come in and start dictating your life and telling you what you can do and what you can't do, and forcing you into a way of living that you're not used to. And seeing what that did to my Nellie, my dad's mom, she was really heartbroken. And she lived until she was almost 100 years old. And I think that was just the thing that really struck me the most, is to see how it affected her way of life, and how she was prohibited from riding the horse after a while, like you can't go far and your livestock's being reduced. And it just really, the way people took care of animals when I was a kid was completely different to the way they get treated now, and the way the environment gets treated now. It's almost like just forcing people to make this disconnection, and treat the environment and animals like they're just inert matter. They're just for our purposes, and we can control this thing. Just like here in Flag, the sacred mountain is called Oko'oslid, and it's sacred to the indigenous people here, but it's being mined, for recreation, and it's renamed. It's renamed to San Francisco Peaks, which is a colonizer, Saint Francis Frere. So like all these sacred places and people are just renamed. Like they're the identity of them is just stripped. The indigenous identity is stripped and it's replaced, So I think now, like, I've recently went on this strike of not eating meat because of the way animals are being treated. And I just don't agree with that, because there's this, some animals are just being in pens all day long, just sitting there. And then reproduction is being forced on them. And then when they have their babies and they're done feeding, they just take them away. And it just made me, I kind of made that connection. Like that's what they do to women in this culture, where we don't have agency anymore in our own decisions over our bodies, over a lot of things. And women, the environment, and animals all have been mined in some way or another.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you reference mining, right? Like I heard you even say mind the mind.
Yeah.
Like the mind has been mined, which that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
But then you're also talking about the environment. Of all the environmental ways in which mining has happened, it seemed that uranium has been one that you've really taken to. In 2017, in the intro, I was mentioning that you did a social art exhibition, and that was around mining. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that exhibition and, just more about it?
Yeah. I was working with Dr. Ann Collier, and we had several meetings, and she wanted to know more about it. And we wanted to try to make that connection between mining and, psychology. So we just kind of started talking about ways that we could implement traditional healing practices for people who are suffering from this. But first, it needed a name. We needed to know more about it. So we didn't want to go on to we went to Cameron, and we presented our work, and everybody was just kind of like, okay, this is, people come out and tell us this all the time. This is nothing new. So we kind of like thought we need to kind of change up the way we're going about this. We need to do something for the community before we, attempt to go out there and try to take something. So we started talking about art projects. We had a meeting with Sean Scopland and John Tano, and they had another exhibition that they did with fire, and they said, well, we could do the same thing. And we thought, this is great. We could bring in grassroots. We could bring in people from NAU that are doing research, like Janie Ingram and Tommy Rock. We could bring in UNM, University of New Mexico, because they're doing the birth cohort study. It was just a great opportunity to bring all these people who were very knowledgeable about this topic, and basically just teach people about it. Give them 1 week, or no, one day to just sit in a room, and we're just going to give you all this information. And we also had what was her name? The lady who wrote Yellow Dirt. It'll come to me later. But we had her come out, and we recruited all these artists, and we just basically threw all this information onto them. And then after that day, we took them to uranium mines and drove them around and showed them the proximity, how close people live to these mines, and just to give them a good idea of what we're talking about. Because some of the mines, not too long ago, a few years ago, they finally put signs up, but before that there was none. So there was like toys out there. There was alcohol, bottles, and just, you can tell that, kids had crossed over and played in those mines without knowing. And I think the last mine we visited, we're coming down, and there was a birthday party happening, and everybody was just sitting there like, what? Yeah. What is going on here? And I think I didn't realize it was going to really have that emotional impact. And then we also had community members come together and talk about their stories. And it was it was a real emotional day. And then on the last day, when we got everybody back together, I gave a speech about the cultural and psychological impacts, and through my experience, and the stuff that I went through. And I think that's what, at that point, everybody just broke down. People were crying, people were angry, and people were just... They're like, why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you tell us this was going to be like this? This is even the native artists that were part of the group live near these areas, but didn't have all that information. And they were really upset. And I just told Anne, I was like, this is what you call decolonization. This is what you call healing from historical trauma, because people, it's almost all the symptoms of grief when somebody dies. You're crying, you're angry, you're in disbelief. Like, why would people lie to us and not tell us this information when it's happening just right here adjacent to us? But yeah, it was huge. And I just said, this is good, because now they're going to go away for a year. They're going to think about this, and they're going to create a masterpiece and a piece of art, and then they're going to bring it back. And which we did. It went up, and then we won a Viola Award for that. It was huge. People were really moved by it. I went to the exhibit and watched people walk around and look at some of the stuff. Yeah. And I would just listen to the conversations. And that's all I could ever ask for, is just to create those conversations and to make it happen.
Well, congrats on.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It is. It's amazing to listen to. And you actually, to me, listening to it, I hear how you played out the process of wanting to respect the area you're trying to represent. Saying that at first you tried to go in and do something, and then you took a step back and said, we need to get investment from the artists, get information from the people that live here.
Yeah.
And make it a grassroots thing, and then we collaborate and work together to share with one another.
Yeah, and that was before the whole CBPR stuff. Like I kind of had to learn it myself. The next time I went out there, because a lot of the people that showed up at those meetings were elders, and I'm over here presenting to them in English, and it just it was just like cognitive dissonance and like the way I was presenting myself. And I was a little ashamed that I was not showing them that respect. So I said, I have to do this again. I have to completely do this again. And I translated everything into Navajo, and I went back and I spoke to them, and I put all the terminology in Navajo so that they could understand. So that was speaking to everybody. And it was so rewarding, because after that, people wanted to tell their stories. People wanted to like tell us things, and they wanted to be a part of it. And the elders were laughing and they were included. And it was so amazing. That's all I could ask for, is because we respect our elders, They're a huge part of who we are, and they need to be a part of this process too. And it was really nice to see them, see them there.
You're living out your vision of, young Davona as a young girl in Big Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sensing a very strong connection to your language. I was wondering if you could talk more about that. It sounded like it was important to you to go back and learn how to give this presentation in Navajo so that you could deliver it to the elders. I heard you mention earlier also that it was important to you to have your children in a school where they would learn Navajo as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think language is important. I mean, our language is very poetic. It's very descriptive. And sometimes when I'm with my sisters, there's certain things that just don't sound right when I say it in English. And I'm like, this person is being like, Joel. And then we look at each other and we're like, Dana, Tina. We're like, yes. And then it just makes sense, and I don't know. It's just a part of who we are. I grew up, my grandma raised me for many years as a kid. So she only talks Navajo. Yeah. And I was very fluent when I was young. But when my dad came back and, took us back, he didn't really think it was important for us to know Navajo. He told me that if I knew Navajo at that level, that I would have an accent and that people wouldn't take me serious and I wouldn't fit into the white man's world because they would be frustrated with me, with the way I used the language. And it was, so he just kind of like didn't push it on us to learn. It didn't really want us to go through those struggles. And like I said before, he went to boarding school and he was forced to not talk Navajo, and he was beat for it. So I think just that being passed on to us and his experience, he just wanted to protect us.
And I guess, like, for me, when I hear that, I would just think that it totally informed your experience. When you were talking about what it was like growing up and just thinking something's not quite right. Yeah.
I think, I feel like it's harder to, like, even the stuff that my dad went through and the people that, like, that generation that really went through a lot of trauma. It's hard even today to get through, like, to tell him about, no, we need to go back, because, I mean, my dad, because of all the stuff that he went through, he really suffered from alcoholism. So it was something that it just didn't want to. Well, John Trudell, okay, he's somebody that I followed since I was young, and he's the one who talks about mining of the mind as well, and he talks about the drunken Indian and how we have to be thankful for them because they were in this place where they didn't want to adopt this new culture, but they weren't allowed to be who they were. So they just decided to be nothing. Like, I'm just going to be nothing. And as the next generation looking down at that, it's like, what are we going to do about this? You know, our fans, they're lost. So we see that they're lost. And I think if he completely adopted a Christian way, I'd be completely Christianized and I'd have different views right now. Mm-hmm. But because I saw him suffering and I saw him refusing to completely be assimilated and other men to be completely assimilated, I knew that like there was some work that needed to be done there, that they were resisting something. So that was a message for me to revitalize my language, to revitalize who I was.
Wow, yeah. You know what? When you were talking about this just jumped in my mind. Dan, I don't know if you know this, but so I used to teach the addictions class at NAU, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I met Davona initially. It was through that class. She was one of my students. So I was the white guy in the front of the class, giving this Western perspective on how to treat substance use
reinforcing those
disorders.
ethical standards that come from that ethnocentric perspective.
That was me. And Davona there was a presentation, or every student had a class presentation to do on a drug of choice. And Davona asked if she could do hers on historical trauma. I was like, yes, please. And I just remember I was enamored, like 100%. I was so enamored by everything that you were saying. And I hear you talking about historical trauma a lot in this interview thus far. Mm-hmm. I'm just assuming that some of our listeners might not be totally familiar with that concept or even what it is. Do you think, like in a nutshell, can you kind of break down what is historical trauma and what you're referring to? And when we use that word or those words, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I usually start with that too. Historical trauma was defined by Maria Braveheart Yellowhorse, or did I say that right? Braveheart, and or Yellowhorse Braveheart, and she defined it as the ongoing cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over across generations, and it's also in one's own lifespan. So it's not just stuff that has happened in the past, it's stuff that we're dealing with right now, because history is something that we're making every day, like yesterday's history. Mm-hmm. So it's just this thing that is just happening all the time, and it gets passed on, and I think it's really has been inscribed in our DNA and like who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually had an experience with this as a young 20-year-old. I worked as a paraeducator for kids in special education way back. And there was one of the students that there's like sometimes in life there's people that you build a real connection with. And one of the students that I built a real connection with was a native student in the area that I was in. And one day he was crying and I was really impacted. I was like, oh, what's going on for you? And I had thought something had gone on in the school setting. I kind of was like in a position where I wanted to be a protector and like, yeah, what happened to you? So we can go fix this thing or take care of whatever made you feel this way. And yeah, he told me that he was crying for his people, for the ancestors, and his people and the trauma that they had endured. And it was so powerful. And in that moment, for me, what I was really attuned to was his connection to his family, his heritage beyond like the family that he lived with, beyond the people in his immediate environment, but just his genuine, deep connection to his people.
Yeah, I feel like Indigenous people are very loyal to the suffering, of their ancestors and the suffering of their people and the suffering of the environment. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of that gets displaced, though. I think they call it displaced loyalty, because people so when I was younger, I read the story. I read Jack Kerouac's book, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go live on the wild side. I'm gonna go travel the world and do all these things, and just not, maybe I'll just write about everything and make a book. And I feel like I had this kind of warrior spirit in me that I needed to do something with. And at the time, I didn't know much about myself as much as I thought I did. And I kind of displaced that into trying to live life on the edge, trying to be a radical, trying to, I mean, drinking and just doing whatever I wanted to try to fulfill that. But what I didn't realize at the time is that I was displacing that warrior spirit in me, and that I had a fight somewhere else that I was not pursuing. And it's because of this feeling of, I should be dead. Survivor's guilt. I should be dead. I shouldn't be here. Like, my people suffered so I could be here. And they were great people. They were the real, indigenous people that we look up to and that we should be like. But what am I? Nothing close to that. So I feel like we try to match that suffering, and sometimes it becomes maladaptive, where we drink and do all these things that isn't good for us, but we feel like we're being wild. We feel like we're feeling that wild Indian role that people portray us as, because we don't have good images of ourselves. We just have the cowboys and Indian image that people see us as. But in reality, we don't really know who we are sometimes. We start to attach ourselves to the wrong images of being indigenous, like mascots and all these other things that are harmful and that don't really represent us. I mean, I've traveled to Detroit and people ask me, "Oh, you live in a teepee? Do you hunt buffalo?" And it's like, "No, I'm a sheep herder."
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, they thought we were all dead. Yeah. That was their thinking. It's like, we can't believe, like, there's a little Indian here. I was their little Indian. I was like your little token Indian. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't know that was what was happening to me. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And, people like me, I'm a little exotic and I'll go with this. But later I realized what was happening is just like this misrepresentation of who I really was. And because I wasn't living in a teepee or hunting buffalo, in a way I was a little ashamed, like, oh my God, I'm not that Indian they want me to be. And so, there's times I just kind of played along, like, okay, well, I guess, sometimes go to teepees, But then later I went home and I'm like, holy cow, I'm a kind of ashamed of myself. Like, why did I do that? I wasn't honoring who I was. And I think that really changed something in me, where when I left from there, I started to learn more about myself. I started to embrace my, being Dene, being Navajo. And that was a huge thing for me, because I started to feel honored, to be a descendant of my grandmother and their struggles from the long walk. I started reading about their struggles, and I changed where I place my loyalty. Maybe I'm going to be an activist now. Yeah. I'm going to do this. And I told my dad, like, I want to be an activist. And he said, that's a death wish. That all activists die and they get killed, and just kind of tried to burst my bubble. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go out like that, but at least I'm going to go out, fighting for what I believe in.
Getting in tune to connecting to what was there underneath. Yeah. And for him, his idea about that was informed by his experience.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not even physical death, but the way you speak about it is so fluid to dip in and out of analogy that he had that kind of cultural death, and he had to become,
Yeah.
you used the word like nothing or empty as a means for not to assimilate
Yeah.
as a complete compromise. So he experienced a bit of a death of that, and
Yeah.
you felt that wild self. You came to connect to yourself. For me, I had questions in my mind going on like, well, how did that transition happen? That's a big mental shift. Was that just a process for you, or was there an epiphany, like a moment of just realization with that, or were you moving that direction?
It was, I didn't think I was ever gonna really find my way. I was lost for a very long time. I had my first kid, and I was like, oh, things change. And I said, wow, this is the next generation I'm looking at. I'm responsible now. Like before I was never really responsible for anything. And it was just me, and I just did whatever I wanted. And I felt like having a child changed that. And I had to be a better person, because now it was my responsibility to pass those things on. And then I started to remember, my dreams and my goals and the things that I really wanted to do. And I just started slowly changing my way of thinking. But I think you have to realize, like, when somebody comes from a place of trauma, it's hard to get out of that mindset. It's hard to change the way you think. And I think for me, I had to come back home, because at that time I was living in Kansas. I had to come back home. I had to be around family, because before, you're thinking, I don't need family. I don't need anybody. I can do this alone. But at that time, it just kind of came like, I need family. I need my homeland, and I'm yearning for that connection again. And I've been so disconnected for so long that I needed balance. And because no matter what we're going through, we're always trying to achieve balance in some way. That's why people drink, because they're trying to balance something within themselves to feel better. And the other stuff wasn't working, and it was putting me in a bad place, and I wanted to change, and especially for my son. And I started, then my focus was to be a good mother, a good mother. And then my partner ended up passing away when I was pregnant with our third son.
Oh my goodness.
And then I was like, holy shit. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to?
That's okay.
I'm like, you know what? The odds are against me. People say, that if there's not a father in the household, my kids are more likely to be delinquents. My kids are more likely. I'm basically gonna fail. And this whole patriarchal thinking of like, we need a man in the family to, be successful. But that was my way of thinking then. And I was like, okay, well, I got to go to school, because now I got to be a mom. I got to be a dad, and maybe hopefully find a daddy along the way.
Yeah.
But I did. I went to school, and the first class that I took was parenting and psychology. Blew my mind. I saw myself in it. I saw my kids in it, and I saw something change. Like, I realized I wasn't present as I thought I was. I was expecting my kids to move along life quickly so that I can meet these goals. It's like thinking that they just had to understand that, mom's got to go to school. Mom's got to do this. You need to just get up. You need to just get moving. Let's go, And I went into this pilot mode. Like, we're just going to live life like this. We got to get moving, and I don't want to hear it, And one day I was sitting in class, and my instructor asked me, she's like, Davona, how old's your 2-year-old? Is he a baby or a big boy? And I said, oh, he's a big boy. And she just like, no, he's a baby. And I was like, what? And then I'm thinking, like, I'm expecting him at home to be a big kid to like understand things and to help me. And he's the one that like kind of has the most tantrums. And I just considered him the difficult child. And I freaked out. I went home that night and they were all in bed and I saw his picture on the wall and I just cried. And I thought, I am so sorry. I'm trying to make you grow up and you're not ready to grow up and you're resisting it. And so the next day we were leaving and usually I'm like, just let's go. And he'll throw himself on the floor and I'll just walk off like, okay, we're leaving you. Bye. And this time I stopped and I'm like, well, maybe the other kid can just carry this bag and I can hold his hand. So I reached out to him and he just got up, stopped crying, grabbed my hand, and walked to the car. And I was like, it was really emotional. I was like, oh my God, he just wanted love, you know? He just wanted me to like treat him like a baby. And like he was left out. And it really like, I think that changed. I was like, what am I like missing out on all these moments, you know? Because I got to get all these things done, I'm forgetting about them. Like my time with them has been more about how much time I spend with them, not quality, you know? And I want to have more moments of like quality time with them than just more hours, you know? And I thought that was more important.
Yeah. Oh, so that class had a really powerful impact on you.
Yeah, it changed me. That's when I'm like, I'm going to psychology. This is it. And, you know, I knew this was the thing for me. And it just kind of like started bringing me back to kind of slowing down and like recognizing that I have a huge influence on my children. And in order for me to have an influence on them, I have to change how I'm thinking. I have to change how I parent. And yeah, it was almost like, it's like being in church or something. I'm just sitting there like, amen to that, you know?
Boy,
Yeah.
it's so powerful though, because, you know, I asked you what helped you get in touch with yourself that way. And you said like, basically my children, like I looked at, so we were in this place where we're talking about connection to your ancestors, and then you pointed to connection to your posterity as well. And it's all like this interwoven chain that your children were the impetus for you to turn towards what you described as responsibility, but basically connection to yourself, connection to your people in a deeper way than existed before your children.
Yeah, because I feel like in a lot of ways the adults failed me and I didn't want to fail them. And I feel like we're still failing this like the past generation, but no one's going to say it. No one's say, oh, we messed up. We're sorry. You know, us adults are not handling these situations the way we should be. And we're this like evil empire is just getting bigger and bigger. You know, we're not getting stronger, you know, we're not adapting and evolving the way we should be, but this powerful, like dominant predatory class is just getting bigger. And where did we go wrong, you know? And that's where I feel like intelligence is one of the key things, is how we're going to use our intelligence. I mean, John Trudell says that they don't want us to think. They don't want us to be smart. They don't want us to know these things. Otherwise, that's when they surveillance you and they start watching you. Then you scare them when you start thinking, you know, they don't want you to think.
Yeah, certainly. I was wondering, you know, Davona, in addition to your voice, I was curious, well, you mentioned so many important issues like uranium mining, historical trauma, drinking. You know, we didn't even really touch on this too. And I think it's such a culturally relevant one, is mascots. And like cultural context portrayal of, I think the way I heard you describe it was like the way the Indian should be kind of thing.
Yeah.
All of these things seem so important. I was wondering, who are some of the voices that we need to pay attention to, that we need to amplify and put the spotlight on? I've heard you mention John Trudell.
Yeah. Well, my sister, Amanda Blackhorse, she's the one who was in the middle of the fight, who took it on from Suzanne Hardrow. And, from that, I don't really know too much about the legal stuff with that, but I know that they were saying it was something to do with age, where they didn't meet the certain criteria and all these stipulations. So they denied their case. So they kind of, my sister became that next person that Suzanne started to train. Like, this is actually my sister went to Chief's game, and she protested, and people were like spitting at them and like throwing things at them and swearing at them, and nobody around was doing anything. And she was just like outraged. So she agreed, I'm going to do this, let's do this. And so it became Blackhorse et al., Washington. So she was really forefront in this fight. And at the time, I wasn't really sure. Like, I was afraid for her because of all the things my dad said. But I started to think back to when I was in Detroit, when I was younger, and the way people saw me, and the way they thought that I was this cowboys and Indians type of Indian, and what that did to me, and how that made me feel bad about myself and made me feel ashamed of myself, and how we didn't have a place to learn about ourselves and to see like a reflection of ourselves in that positive light I was talking about earlier. And just the way people disrespect our culture because my kids are Sioux, they're half Sioux. Their dad was from Rosebud, South Dakota. And to have a headdress, you have to earn that. And some people, it's a lifetime, Not everybody can wear those things. And to see it being paraded around, to see people disrespecting, who we are, to be holding up bloody scalps. And those are like signs of genocide. Those are signs of people gave bounties for us, for children, for women, for men. And it was a way to kill us off. And I don't find any honor in that kind of, in genocide, period. So when people constantly try to tell me who I am and who I should be and what, I'm honoring you, this is a way of honoring you, why aren't you proud? And to me, it's like, no, you're not honoring me. You're actually disrespecting me. And I'm not even that type of Native American either, but my kids are. And I find it very disrespectful that because a lot of our stuff's being fragmented and commodified. A lot of our culture, our language, our artifacts, our ceremonial tools put in museums and things like that. So basically we're just being like taken apart, and we're being treated like an object that doesn't have any kind of spiritual connection, like that savage type Indian.
Yeah, so many important issues again. I really appreciate everything that you've talked about today. And just bringing that to the show. The interview kind of went different directions I would never anticipated. I feel 100% fine with that. I was curious. I heard you mention a little bit about Flagstaff earlier. That when you came here, I think I had heard you refer to Glendale as big city, and then you came back here. I guess I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about your connection to the land here in Flagstaff, and essentially just like, I guess, what it means to you?
Well, I want to. I feel like this is home for me. And I feel like being within the boundaries of the Four Sacred Mountains is really important for me to have that spiritual connection to the environment. It was hard for me to have that connection, from a place like Phoenix, for me to be a part of these issues that are happening on indigenous land, like uranium mining, coal mining. Those things are really difficult to do when I'm in another context. Yeah. But I feel like creating a foundation, creating a home where these issues are happening, and to actually be in it was really important, because, like I said, my umbilical cord's buried on the Navajo reservation, and I need to be here, like it's almost like a calling. I need to do the work that I've been talking about. And in order for me to do that work, I have to be here. I have to be connected to the grassroots community around here. I have to be connected to my elders again. I have to be connected to family. And there's no better place to do it than, in a place that's sacred, in a place that's holy. And it's led to a lot of things, because I found out, there's a lot of things happening right now that I would not really have known if I was away from home. Like, there's the jail population here in Flag, and how disproportionate that is, how Indigenous people make up majority of the population in the jail systems, but then majority of the people that live in Flag are white. And it's like, how does that happen, And how our unsheltered people are being treated. It's just, there's so many injustices that I feel like need to be addressed, from home, before we can really try to change other things.
Right. So like home, but also like a place where you can be connected to the work that you feel drawn towards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, it's so powerful. Early on, you mentioned how Western culture came in and mined both culture and the foundation of knowledge that the indigenous people had, and took that away. And then you said, it was a quick comment you made, but you said, and now it's almost like they're trying to return to the knowledge we had way back when, which it was hard for me not to ignore. Like Cody and I, our mission statement for Beyond the Pines is to connect to self, others, and the environment, which is basically what you've laid out for us over and over today. So yeah, what a powerful foundation of knowledge. And I feel like I'm so fortunate to have been able to learn from you a bit about that today. So thank you so much, Davona.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. We support you whatever you do, wherever you go.
Yeah.
And so another thing that I just wanted to mention really quickly is Davona, you so fluently and fluidly bounced between authors and writers that are both Native, and then writers that come from Western culture, from counseling, from the field of counseling psychology. So I want to say that for those of you listening to this podcast, make sure to check out the description, because we'll try and link to the people that you've mentioned, and in particular the voices that you just mentioned that would be really important to listen to.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the stuff I talked about is influenced by Winona LaDuke. So
okay,
yeah.
Great. And we'll put connections to all that, those links in the description. So look for that if you're listening.
No doubt. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, Davona.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're back in the Dunny. Davona just left. She's been sitting with us, hanging out in the Dunny with us, sharing a lot of really powerful information.
Powerful information, no doubt.
Yeah.
What a neat interview.
Yeah, I would say just informative. Just really powerful. It was hard knowing when to stop, because I think I probably would have used all of her time if she had it available, just to hear more about her experiences.
Certainly, yeah.
And I think for me, I mentioned this just at the end of the interview, but it was so paradoxical and hard to avoid thinking about how she mentioned that Western culture came in and basically stripped away some of the ideas and wisdom, the knowledge that her ancestors had, and said, this is the way to approach the world, with that very Western approach to the world. And then she said, now it seems like people are coming back to understanding some of the wisdom that was in the knowledge they had about connecting to each other and connecting to their environment. It was hard to miss that as paradoxical, because our mission statement is to connect to self, others, and the environment.
Yeah. She mentioned so many important things, sources of connection in her life and in her culture. They really stood out to me. I was really drawn into what she was talking about. And I really do feel that same sort of connection to the environment in the way that she was talking about it, and that she was likening it to our mother. You know, a long time ago, I did that talk on climate change and psychology, right? And we referenced E.O. Wilson's biophilia hypothesis and talking about how naturally, because of the way in which we've evolved, like we have a connection to this earth, and we are the way we are because of our mother, or because of the earth. And so I was really drawn into that. I also couldn't help but what left a really big impression on me too, just this image of her as a young girl on the reservation, and thinking like, wow, something's just not right. And also having this feeling, or like this compulsion, or like this impulse, like I got to go do something. Like, and I'm really impressed that she's following through on that. Like she's living out that vision now.
Yeah, maybe feeling compelled to act, and at first not knowing what that meant or how that was. And so coming around to it after she mentioned having her children and feeling responsible for that. So it was like she felt compelled but didn't understand herself well enough, or I don't know for sure. I wouldn't know how to say that accurately, but it was like she had to develop an awareness of what is this compulsion, and then how do I enact that? How do I put that into action?
Yeah, and so it's shown up, right?
Yeah.
Like when she's talking about her studies and what she's doing, I was fascinated, or just again drawn into when she's talking about uranium mining and that social exhibition they did. That was really powerful stuff, I thought.
Powerful energy in the room, too. I think that would be important to note. There was one moment when she was speaking about how knowledge is intimidating to others, talking about how maybe majority culture or people in power don't want people to be informed. And so when she's consuming information or learning, and people in her culture are learning about what has happened, she kind of portrayed that as that can be threatening to people in power. And I could feel the aura of that in the room, like her connection to saying, no, I am going to seek information. I'm going to learn.
Yeah. I'm acting on this. This is important. Absolutely. Yeah.
So really, really powerful stuff. One last thing for me, and I think I'd mentioned this, and I would encourage people again, check out the description. So fluid in her ability to reference someone like John Bowlby, and then come back around and talk about her sister, Amanda Blackhorse, talk about others that she could just reference so fluidly, basically two strong cultures.
Man, what an experience, huh? Just sitting with Davona today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much to Davona Blackhorse for sitting in the dunny with Dan and I.
Yeah. Well, why don't you take us out by shouting us out?
No doubt. So first off, hit up our website, www.beyondflag.com, flag spelled
FLG.
And you can always hit us up on Instagram, beyond #story flag _ with the post
Hashtag in there.
Post feed. Yeah, so hit us up on Instagram, beyond _ flag.
And boomerang that story on Twitter.
And boomerang your story on Twitter.
In the TikTok.
Yikes. Just check us out on Instagram.
All right. Take care.
Lovies.